Sunday, March 22nd, 2020, the fourth Sunday of Lent, Year A. A number of years ago, I lived with a Dominican priest that I just did not like. I realize you might find that hard to believe, that sometimes we Dominicans don't always like each other. Thankfully, the guys I live with now, we get along well. I like them all. But this guy I lived with a number of years ago just pushed my buttons. I felt he was lazy, selfish, and angry. He was a bitter man. And so it was hard living together in this small community of just 4 or 5 of us. And the thing is, I sat down with him a couple times and tried to talk things out with him to see how he could change. Of course, it was one-sided from my perspective. It just didn't work. And so what I found myself doing was, in my head, just always criticizing him. Worst of all, I just could not see anything good in him. Every time he said something or did something, I just would look at it and take it the wrong way. For example, at dinner time, sometimes he would tell a joke, and it was a funny joke, but I would not laugh because I didn't want to give him that pleasure, that affirmation. I just did not want to see anything good in him. Well, eventually I went to confession about this. I went to a Jesuit priest when I was on retreat. Let me give you some advice. Don't go to a Jesuit for a confession. Just kidding. Anyway, this Jesuit priest was very insightful. I told him the whole story. And by that point, I'd been living with the guy for a couple of years. So I was really, this anger I had towards him, this inability to look for anything good in him, it was really deeply inside me at that point. So I confessed the whole thing. And this Jesuit said, what I want you to do is I want you in your mind to take this Dominican brother of yours, this priest, I want you to take him to Jesus on the cross. Imagine you're standing there at the foot of the cross and take him there with you, and then look up at Jesus and ask Jesus, Jesus, what do you see in this guy? You died for him. Why? What is in him that you love so much? What is it in him that you can see that I cannot? Really, again, very insightful penance and confession that this Jesuit gave to me. And it's a penance I'm still working on. So again, be careful with those Jesuits. But the reality is, this story for me is just like our readings today. They're all about seeing and not seeing. Seeing versus blindness. Or as St. Paul says in the second reading, light versus darkness. We have to try to open our eyes to see. And not just to see, but as the first reading tells us, to see the way God sees. God tells Samuel the prophet, who's carried away with the physical appearance of Jesse's older sons, and says, oh, this one's the one that's going to be the king because he looks good, he's big and strong and so on. And the Lord tells Samuel, don't just look at the appearances, that God, I look at the heart. That's what I look at. Not at the superficial, I look in the depth of the heart. So ultimately, I think our readings today are telling us to try to see as God sees. That's what true vision is. So in the gospel, we have the story that I really want to focus on today. A gospel about a man that Jesus heals of blindness. And so in these gospels, these beautiful Lenten gospels for this year A, like last week's gospel about the Samaritan woman, this is a long dialogue process. And the blind man again represents us, because he slowly comes to see Jesus for who he is. He sees God in Jesus. He sees Jesus as God, not just because he healed him, but he sees Jesus as somebody who is from God. And that blind man who's healed is contrasted with the Pharisees and religious leaders who are blind because they are like the way I was with that Dominican I lived with. They just did not want to see anything good in Jesus. They were blinded to his goodness, to his power, to the miracle he performed by healing this blind man. They would not give him the credit of doing something good, of doing God's will. And so Jesus, in this gospel story, highlights by his healing, and John the evangelist highlights the contrast between the healing, the seeing, the new vision of the blind man versus the blindness of the Pharisees, who physically can see, but spiritually they are absolutely blind. So the thing is, all of us have our blind spots. All of us are limited in our vision. All of us have our prejudices. All of us have a tendency to see what we want to see in ourselves or in others in different situations. The real question is not so much what we see, but the real question is, what are we looking for? If you and I are looking for the negative in somebody else, the negative in a certain situation, if that's what we focus on, that is what we're going to see. I'm sure if you are honest with yourself, you'll realize that you've done the same thing that I did with that Dominican I lived with. I was looking for bad stuff. I just did not want to see anything good in him. So I saw what I wanted to see. I saw his negative side, his downside, his shadow side, and it just drove me crazy. I allowed him to push my buttons. We do the same thing. There's groups or individuals that we look at and we just don't see anything good in them. That's such a huge thing in our government right now. We're paralyzed with liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican who cannot work together because they just refuse to see anything good in that other person, that other party, that other way of thinking or seeing things. It's a problem in our world. Again, we just are blind so often because we don't see as God sees. God looks into the heart. God sees everyone the way they really are. So my brothers and sisters, these readings today, this Sunday gospel is all about asking ourselves, where am I blind? Where are my blind spots? Whom am I looking at in a way that is limited, that's not allowing me to see them as they truly are? I'm just so skewed and limited in my vision of this person or even of this situation. Let's talk about the coronavirus situation. Again, we can just look at the downside, the bad things that we're not able to do now, losing money and the fear, the anxiety and all that stuff. And certainly it's challenging, but God wants us to be able to see good in every situation, that there's a possibility of redemption in every person, in every situation. God is somehow there. And you and I, so often when we confront difficulties in our lives, we say, God, where are you? But what we really have to say to God or ask God is, God, help me to see you in this situation, in this person. And so in this coronavirus situation, let us ask God to help us learn, Lord, help us to learn to see where you are in this. What can we do to change, to grow through this situation? How can we see others in our family, our loved ones, whoever it might be? How can we see them in a new and deeper way? How can we grow from this experience? So may the Lord give us eyes to see as He sees. May He give us His vision of ourselves, of others, of every situation we're involved in. May He give us the eyes to see that He is truly present and with us.